Question: do you have an explanation for why the many channelers who say they are channeling the ascended masters seem to completely disagree with one another? There are several channels on the internet who claim to channel the one known as Jesus. There are angry Jesuses and compassionate ones, and few of them seem to agree. Well, of course I have an explanation, but it requires you to know certain things. First of all, channeling, the process of channeling. I take messages from the Ascended Masters. I call them dictations. Some people say, well, that's a form of channeling. And you can call it that. You can say anything where you're getting information from a non-physical source. You can call that channeling if you want to use it in a broad term. I normally don't call what I'm doing channeling because a lot of the channeling that people are doing is trance channeling, where people go into a trance. And it's like you step aside and you allow some entity that's a non-physical entity to take over your mind and speak through you. And the person may describe it as he or she is taken somewhere else to another realm or another dimension and is not even aware in many cases of what is being said. And personally, I would never do that, because I will not let any entity take over my mind. The Ascended Masters are not taking over my mind. They're using my mind to speak through. And I'm conscious of what's happening. I'm not influencing what is being said in the sense that I'm saying it or I'm influencing it, but I could stop it at any time. And the other thing I would say about channeling is that many people who describe trance channeling, they talk about how they feel drained of energy afterwards. They're very tired, they may have a headache, they may have various symptoms. And again, I would never do that. I only feel uplifted after taking a dictation from the Ascended Master. Sometimes the dictation can be over an hour long. And I might be standing up and projecting my voice, so there can be a certain physical effect of that. But I always feel uplifted, elated after a dictation, because I'm receiving energy from the Masters. So those are some measures you can apply. And the reason why this is important is now we need to take the next step in understanding this process is, as I've explained in many of my videos, there are 4 levels of the material universe. The purely physical, which is our physical bodies, our physical senses. And then, but again, everything is energy. So even the physical world is made out of energy that vibrates within a certain spectrum. So above the physical, immediately above it, is what I call the emotional realm, which is also a certain level of vibration. And above that is the mental, and above that is the identity. And then beyond that is the spiritual realm, which is not part of what I call the unascended sphere, which I talk about in my video about how the world was created. So if you really want to understand this question, you need to look at that video. So what we need to realize here is that there are these 3 higher realms. And in each of those realms, there are beings. But the beings in the emotional, mental, and identity realms are not ascended masters. Because they haven't ascended, that's why they're still in those realms that are part of the current unascended sphere. We live in a sphere that's unascended. That's what I explained in the other video about how the world was created. So these are unascended beings, which means they haven't fully overcome the focus on self. They want something. They haven't fully overcome the illusion of separation, because if they had, they would have ascended, right? Okay, so there are these beings. Now, there are some of the channelings that are out there. They call themselves various names. You know, it can be the Pleiadians, the Galactic Federation, the Space Brothers, Abraham, Cryon, those kind of names. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's just honest, you know. They're not pretending to be something they're not. Maybe they are if they claim to have reached the highest levels of consciousness. I don't know, but I haven't followed every channeling out there. But what I'm saying is they don't call themselves ascended masters. But then there are some beings, especially in the mental realm, that are calling themselves ascended masters and claiming to be ascended masters, using ascended master names that have been used by ascended master organizations that are genuine. So what I'm saying is that there are some of these channelings out there that claim to be by ascended masters, but they are not by ascended masters. They are by unascended beings who are using ascended master names. And I consider that dishonest. So the question is, do you have an explanation for why the many channelers disagree with one another? Well, it's because they are channeling beings at these different levels. So you have a being, for example, in the upper emotional realm. It's looking at the world, and it may have a broader understanding of the world than most people in embodiment do. So it's not that there can't be something valuable in these channelings. I'm not saying that. But the being is looking at life from this vantage point, and it's like I've said with this illustration about the observation tower in the forest. You go up to these different levels, and you can see what you can see from that level. You may see the trunks of the trees, you may see the leaves of the trees, whatever. So the emotion level is one level. A being can see what it can see from that level. And so whatever message is being channeled is based on that limited vision. Now you have another being who's in the mental realm, and it's a higher up. It can see more than the other being. So this might give a higher teaching, but it's also different because it's based on this broader vision, but it's still a limited vision. It's still not from the ascended realm. So you see, this is one reason why they don't agree, because they're channeling from different levels. And whatever entity is channeling, it can't go beyond its own level of consciousness. So again, it can still be more advanced than some beings. I mean, some people in physical embodiment. So there may be people who can get some benefit out of studying these channelings. You know, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that from the very beginning, I was always didn't want this. I wanted the ascended masters. When I realized they are ascended masters, that was what I wanted. So, so this is one reason. You know, they have different visions, and therefore they give different messages. Another reason could be that they are seeking to reach different groups of people. I mean, even the ascended masters have explained that when they give teachings from the ascended level, they can't just give the highest truth, because hardly anybody would be able to grasp it. So they always have to look at what kind of, what group of beings are we seeking to reach? And then they are looking at what do these people believe? How do they look at the world? And so you have to give them something based on the vision they have, the worldview they have, so they can connect to the teaching. And then you have to give them something higher so they can go the next step up. But if people are at a fairly low level of consciousness, I've talked about 144 levels, you know. So if people are below the 48th level, where they're into separation and duality and self-focus, you can't give them a very sophisticated spiritual teaching. You have to give them something that can get them out of that. And an example of this is Jesus' teaching, don't do unto others what you don't want them to do to you. That's for people below the 48th level. It says even in the Bible that Jesus taught the masses or the multitudes in parables, but when he was alone with his disciples, he explained much more to the disciples. So there can be levels of teachings. And what can happen in such teachings is that a teaching is adapted to a particular group of people, and therefore it seems to contradict what another group of people believe. So there can be some reasons for that also, that the teachings are aimed at different groups of people. And so what happens in today's age, you know, is that with the internet, if you're interested, you can look for various teachings and channelings, and you find one and you study that, you find another one and you study that, and all of a sudden you begin to see these contradictions. And so it may not necessarily mean that they're all false. But personally, I'm suspicious when you have a being in the mental realm that claims to be an ascended master. To me, that's dishonest. And I've developed the ability intuitively to read the vibration. So I can fairly easily read whether something comes from the mental realm, for example. Okay, so now we need to take this another step up because there's another level of consideration. I've explained, again in my video about how the world was created and in other videos in that playlist, that there are fallen beings. And I'm not going to give a long explanation of this here. You can watch the other video if you want to know what this is. But these are beings who are deliberately working against people's growth. And they were allowed to come to Earth at a certain point in the past. And these fallen beings are doing everything they can to hinder people's spiritual growth. First of all, they try to suppress any knowledge of the spiritual realm or the spiritual path, where you can systematically raise your consciousness. An example of this, the fallen beings took the genuine teachings that Jesus gave. Jesus gave genuine teachings about the path to personal Christhood. The fallen beings created the Roman Catholic Church to suppress his genuine teachings, put him up on a pedestal as the only Son of God, and say that people can't do anything to work out their own salvation. They have to wait. They have to gain salvation either through the church or through Christ. Catholic Church says through the church and the sacraments. The Lutheran churches say only through Christ directly do you gain salvation. So they are denying there's a spiritual path. And that is the fallen beings who are doing that. Now, as the earth has progressed, as the collective consciousness has been raised, more and more people don't believe in this. Another thing the fallen beings have done is called scientific materialism, Marxism, other ideologies that deny that there's any spiritual realm. So more and more people don't believe in this anymore. So the fallen beings have now gone into a different phase where they are trying to, they can't suppress knowledge of the spiritual path or the spiritual realm, or even ascended masters. See, what I explained in my video about how the world was created is that the fallen beings originally were confronted by the ascended masters and given a choice to either go on the path or to reject the path. And they rejected the path, which means they have gone into now seeking to elevate themselves to a godlike status, elevate their egos to a godlike status. And in doing this, the fallen beings are very, very aggressively pursuing this path of denying the existence of ascended masters. You will see that ascended masters is a terminology that has only been used for a little over 100 years. And before that, the fallen beings had managed to suppress all knowledge of ascended masters, even to the point where the masters couldn't stand forward publicly because of the law of free will. And so what has happened is that the masters have now been allowed to announce their existence publicly and even use the terminology, the ascended masters. But the fallen beings, of course, are not happy with this, so they're doing everything they can to counteract it. And one of the ways they're doing this is to create these false channelings and messages that supposedly come from ascended masters. And they are deliberately making them contradictory in order to confuse people. And I met many, many people over the years who have been confused by this. You know, you've come across the concept of ascended masters, then you say, oh, here's this organization, they claim to be taking messages from the ascended masters, let me study that. And you get some benefit out of that. But then later you find, oh, here's another organization that claims to take messages, and you study that and you see, oh, but there's contradictions. So what am I going to believe now? And many people have been confused by this. And this is a deliberate tactic of the fallen beings. And it's not just that they want to confuse people. They actually want to discredit the entire concept of ascended masters or any kind of spiritual being. Because see, the goal of the ascended masters is to make the earth into a closed system where there's no input from the outside. And the input from the outside is naturally the ascended masters who are in the spiritual realm. So they want people, as many people as possible, to deny the existence of a spiritual realm and spiritual teachers, genuine spiritual teachers. And one of the ways they do this is to have these different people who are taking messages from the Ascended Masters, and they are contradictory. So many people give up and say, oh, it's all nonsense. You are throwing the baby out with the dirty bathwater. And it's a deliberate tactic, absolutely deliberate, very aggressive, very vicious, but it's also very subtle, because the fallen beings use something called the Serpentine mind, Serpentine logic, and just one example of this, very general example of this Serpentine logic is the ends can justify the means, which means here's a cause that's so important that we establish communism as the only ideology on earth, that it's justified that we kill millions of people to achieve this goal. Or it's so important that Christianity becomes the only religion, we are justified to kill all the Muslims. Or it's so important that the Aryan race becomes the leader of the world, it's justified to kill all the Jews. So this is the more obvious aspect of Serpentine logic, but they use it in many more subtle ways. And one of the ways they do this, and you can actually see this if you become aware of this, what Serpentine logic is, you can see it in some of these channelings. I remember a number of years ago studying some of these channelings, and I could identify that they came from the mental realm. And then I saw, here is this very, very subtle logic. I can't remember a specific example right now, but that's meant to confuse you. So you don't know what to think, and you don't really dare to say, oh, this can't be real. You don't dare to question it, because it's so subtle, And I've even seen examples of this Serpentine logic where if you accept the initial premises, you can't refute the conclusion. But what you can do is you can step back and say, but I don't have to accept the initial premises, because they are all based on the duality consciousness and separation. This is what I talk about in my non-duality videos. So you can watch some of those also. So basically what I'm saying here is that if you really want to understand why there's all these differences, you have to recognize that the fallen beings are doing everything they can to discredit Ascended Masters as really the ones that are assigned by the cosmic hierarchy to help Earth progress into the Golden Age, and to help us individually escape what I have called this trap of our own minds. The fallen beings want to keep us trapped in our own minds, want to keep us trapped in duality and separation. And the only way to really get out of this, as I explained in several of my non-duality videos and other videos, is to connect to something outside our own minds and outside the material universe, outside the reach of the fallen beings. And that is the Ascended Masters. Because it's like, as I explained in my video how the world is created, there are these levels of creation, and one sphere is created, the beings who are sent in there as extensions of the Creator, they ascend. And the Ascended Masters from the first sphere then co-create the second sphere, and so forth. So our unascended sphere is co-created by the Ascended Masters who ascended in the previous sphere, the sixth sphere. We are extensions of the Ascended Masters. The spiritual path is about walking the path of first attaining a connection to something beyond our own minds, which is our higher selves and the Ascended Masters, and then attaining oneness. And when you attain oneness, you ascend. But how do you ascend? By attaining oneness with your higher self and with the Ascended Masters who created your higher self out of their own beings. That's just simply the process. I mean, this is the process. This is what the fallen beings have done, everything they could to obliterate the knowledge of this, and they'll do everything they can to discredit it. But it's one of those things where when you are walking around down here on Earth, you are seeing everything from this perspective. And so at this level, you can debate, is the Earth flat or is it round? Now, I remember as a child hearing that 500 years ago, most people in Europe believed the Earth was flat. And I was flabbergasted by this, because it was obvious to me by observing the ships coming into the fjord in my childhood that the Earth is round. But then, around the year 2000 or so, I became aware that there's something called the Flat Earth Society. And now there's more and more people who are claiming that we have all been fooled into thinking the Earth is round. But it really is flat. And they have all these arguments for it. So all I'm saying is, at our level of consciousness, I can see why people can be confused. But let's just imagine you got into a rocket, and the rocket rose up from the Earth. And as the rocket goes high enough, there comes a point you can directly see the curvature of the Earth. You can directly see the Earth in 3 dimensions. Then it's not a matter of argument anymore, right? And that's why I'm saying, when you raise your consciousness beyond a certain level, you will connect to the Ascended Masters. You will see that that is the next level up from where we are at here in this unascended sphere. But in order to reach the Ascended Masters, you have to go beyond the emotional realm, the mental realm, and the lower identity realm, where there are fallen beings in those 3 levels that will do everything they can to prevent you from going beyond them and reaching the Ascended Masters. So I hope this helps explain the differences, because they obviously deliberately put out contradictory messages in order to confuse people and in order to discredit the entire idea that they are Ascended Masters.